Thank you again, Ernesto. And let's jump directly, because we're a little bit behind schedule. Let's jump directly into welcoming our next guest. His name is Carlo Habet. He's no stranger, but he's here today in a different capacity. He's here as the president of the Belize National Association of Real Estate. Good morning, Carlo, and welcome to the show.
Morning, William. Morning, Kathy. Thank you guys for having me.
Now, is this a new association? Let's start there. And what led to the formation of this association?
Good questions. No, it's not new. Actually, it's been around since 2005. But over the years, we kind of went a little bit dormant. And due to a lot of issues in the real estate industry that were still not resolved, I would say, even since 2005, we decided that it was really important to kind of come together. There's strength in numbers. Actually, we were talking about this earlier with Kathy. The power of man lies in organization, right? So we need to kind of get together and go after the same thing. That same thing specifically was licensing, or essentially regulation of the industry. Because one of the problems we have is that there's no real criteria to be a real estate agent / broker. Anybody can just go out and start it, or anyone can kind of posit that they're selling real estate. And then that's when you get some of these horror stories that people say, oh, well, this person took my deposit and this person ran away, or, and then I can't find them. And then we do get some complaints like that still as a part of the association. But, we can't really do anything about it legally. And I think that's why it's important to get this real estate board going, whereby we can issue licenses, but at the same time, we could also dole out punishments and revoke licenses if necessary for people that are, not ethical, essentially. And even in the short term, before that happens, one of our benefits, I think, of the association is our code of ethics, which is extremely stringent. And actually, it's actually of a higher standard than the law, for instance, in Belize, that some of the things that are necessitated that you must abide by, they're actually higher in ethics than the law. So we encourage, I guess, people who are serious professionals, like if they really want to take their craft to another level, they join. We also offer continuing education, different classes, and certifications that actually help you too with foreign buyers and things like that, for instance. It's a value proposition that we're trying to make, essentially, and we think we're making it at this point.
Now, the quick follow-up question for me is, generally in Belize, we have a very open attitude where everything is on the fly, kind of attitude, In other places, you may have to actually go to school, and you have to take a series of tests to qualify to act as an agent. Is that how do people right now actually in Belize, without those kinds of parameters, actually declare themselves as real estate agents?
Well, so that's the problem, is that is happening. There are some people, granted, who may have taken a course elsewhere. Like I myself, I had done some course study in Texas specifically for, before I got into it. So I wanted to be prepared. But at the same time, some things don't prepare you for the environment that is Belize. But actually, William, that's a great point, that essentially that would be the logical follow-up to licensing, is that you would have to pass a test. You would have to do a course of study and then pass a test to be that would be a part of licensing. The problem is that now there's nothing. And so like one of the ways I would say that you can filter, if you want to know if your agent is professional, let's say, you can ask them if they're part of an association, 1. 2, if they're registered with the FIU and the tax authorities, is 2. And I think between those, you'll find that, you have a pro. And like all of our members, for instance, are registered with the FIU and tax authorities. That's something that we try to filter as well, because you're not really professional until you're paying your dues, in a sense as well, right? So.
And the follow-up question, sorry, Kathy, it's very simple. Because a lot of people, when you have an official title like real estate agent, broker, whatever, people think that you're not catering for a local clientele at all, that it's primarily foreigners that you're going to deal with. So what's the big deal with it? Why? And is that a misconception?
I think it is, but that's actually a very good point. I did want to mention, although it's a touchy button, that real estate is an earner of foreign exchange, which is very important, and sort of also the start of foreign direct investment, because most people, before you invest, you need property, So it is a very important cog, in the grand scheme. But I mean, me, for instance, I do about 80% of my business with locals and right in the city. So my market is a bit different than, say, someone in Placencia or San Pedro, who I'm guaranteeing you that they have that opposite split, that they're probably 80% foreigners. But I'll tell you that regardless of who you deal with, you need to have those ethics, and you need to know how to do business and how to transact. How to treat people fairly, I think, is also very important. So yes, that's a misconception, William, that there are a lot of agents that cater really more than anything else to a local audience, and there is one, and I think over time I've gotten to kind of understand who that customer is, their kind of financing, what they're looking for. And I can tell you offhand too that it's a shame that there are not many good products in a good price range for well-to-do Belizeans, and we're talking like just middle-class people. If you have a decent job, you have a double income, home, both of you have jobs, you still can't find something decent. It's really that is another problem. That's more of a macro problem, but also that's something too a private sector could also solve. But I find that a lot of it has to do essentially with bad valuation. That's essentially putting properties that should be in the reach of certain people out of reach. So that's actually a very important social issue I think we have to tackle at some point.
Right, quite interesting. And both you and William touched on some important topics as well. So I want to deviate a little bit, but talking about the significance of an association such as yours. I'm thinking about this from more of a bigger picture perspective, and a local perspective as well. Now, there's not a lot of opportunities for investment in Belize. So if you have, some extra funds, or if you have land you have land that you have inherited in some way, real estate itself becomes a medium of investment, right? For businesses or for persons as well. Now, I think it's significant to understand and for you to share with us and elaborate on, why the importance of first selecting, a broker that is a part of an association that has been vetted and checked, right? Especially if that's an investment for yourself. And then also, the role that real estate broker, or agent, could or should be carrying out for a local investor or even an international investor. And I think from the international perspective, it's also very significant to say that real estate is a foreign exchange earner, and it may have been through COVID, not necessarily a huge, but it was a consistent foreign exchange earner. So that's important to note. And the reason why it was not huge was simply because there were not a lot of people coming. But there is a lot of potential in it nonetheless, and the consistency of it definitely indicated that, right? People were willing to take that risk and look for the deal, so to say. And, the international angle, looking at it from local and the international perspective is, we are selling our land, and that is a touch point for so many people in so many ways. So why work with this entity, and what can you really offer to, the public, so to say?
No, certainly. You touch on a lot of points. It's kind of like a very loaded question. I'll try and get to all of it, but no, it's fine, because I think this is the way a lot of people feel, and I think it's also important to sort of dispel certain notions, because again, a lot of the bad stories come from non-professionals, essentially, right? So I think that's really the main value of choosing an agent that does subscribe to an association and does, pay their dues to the government, is registered with the FIU, so that they're making sure that they have their anti-money laundering policy going. Because that's the other thing too, is that unfortunately real estate is also a vehicle for money laundering worldwide. And it's definitely definitely a shame because it does come with more paperwork for us, for instance. But that's the kind of stuff, for instance, that an agent that's not a part of an association or registered would do for you. And so I think that's essentially the value proposition is that an agent, they know the ropes, they know the system, they should be able to get your deal done. Like that really is it. Like I've heard stories about agents standing in the way of a deal, and I say, well, that makes no sense because your job is to consummate this deal, is to make your two sides come to an agreement, and they both win essentially, right? That's how it should be. And I think that's the hallmark of a professional, that they will essentially go a lot of times above and beyond their duties. And I know I do constantly, and I never even realized it until kind of later in my career that I was doing things that were not necessary as an agent, but in the essence of getting a deal done, which is important. I mean, sometimes I'll tell you what, a buyer and a seller can blow up their own deal. And I have been in that situation before. So again, like you kind of act as like the mediator, and you're making things happen. That's really what it is, right? And so on top of that, you know, you have things like they're going to guide you through the contract phase, and they're going to help you to transact the land. They're there to kind of advise you as well on anything that you might not know. So for me, and I'll be honest too, like this is like, I mean, I have a couple properties too that I have invested in over time, and you might want to resell them. And even when I'm reselling my properties, I go through another agent, not just myself, right? So I mean, I have a brokerage, I market it too, but I also put it with other people that I know and trust. And I'm happy to pay someone a commission. That's how I look at it, because you're doing your job and you're putting two people together and making sure everything is above board. And I think people don't really appreciate that and how much that means, because if you're able to kind of walk through a transaction like a breeze, that's actually not the norm, right? So if someone can do that for you, that is worth every penny that you're paying, essentially, right? And I think I may have even lost the other part of your question, Kathy.
That's okay. That's okay. But what I think is important, and you know, the significance of the real estate transaction, and maybe seeing it as mostly a financial transaction, because when the word finance comes into play, then you know there's regulation. There's these processes that we naturally in our minds, you know, will go through. Right? You're not going to just randomly identify how much the value of a property is, right? Because you need to think about the now and the future and what it could potentially be down the road. So I think that's, to me, I agree with you fully that, you know, it's a very important and significant financial transaction at the ending of the day. So that needs to be emphasized. The other part that I was asking you about was just simply, you know, you talked about the services that you offer, but you know, I think it's important to look from the local perspective and international perspective, the legitimizing of that transaction, and that it is the job, in my view, of a real estate broker to look out for the interests of their client and look out also for the interests of the environment. Like for a good example of that could be, you know, do you, and this is a simple example, but do you, you know, recommend the setup of a factory in a residential area, as an example?
Yeah,
right? So there's all these additional roles that the association can play to lead to a, you know, a better just environment across the board, and a more I don't know if planned, just to simplify the statement.
Yeah, in the
what's your
absence
thoughts
of
on all of
zoning.
that? Right.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's an interesting point you bring up, and because that kind of shows like the far-reaching aspects of real estate that people don't really consider too. That rightly so, like zoning, that also is a part of real estate. But like here, there's no zoning, so there's no one to tell you you can't build something here. Because actually, I get these questions, trust me, especially from foreigners, because they're used to it, and they would say, "Oh, are there any restrictions to the property? Are there any zoning?" And I would just say no, because that's the truth. I would say no. I said, you're in a residential area, like for instance, and maybe this specific developer wouldn't want you to put something commercial in that sense. There's no real law, but sometimes there's covenants, you know, if you're in a neighborhood, a specific neighborhood, which is also good. And that's meant to really protect the other residents of that neighborhood in the future. So you do have sometimes that kind of planning on like a developer level, but unfortunately not on like a macro level. But actually, I think you touched on something earlier in your question that I wanted to mention too, that indeed real estate, even for locals, it's really the best investment that you can make at some point in your life. And that's what I'm saying. That I actually do a lot of business with Belizeans, and I'm not talking about rich guys or whatever. I'm talking about a lot of middle class Belizeans who maybe are looking to retire. Maybe they're public servants, and they know that that's their retirement plan. Like, this is the best, most prudent, most sound way to invest your money. And I think that is around the world. Like, at some point, you're going to realize, no matter what profession you do, you're going to realize that real estate is the best investment, and you're going to want to invest in real estate. And so at that point, you need a professional, because you could easily say, oh, I have a budget of this, and you can just go blow it somewhere with someone that's going to tell you, yeah, just buy that, right? And that happens too, unfortunately. Some people are more concerned with selling than they are with matching, their buyer, their seller to the right client. So that's also important too, like knowing your duty of care. I mean, all of these things kind of fall into why you want a professional, and not just that, but why you want to, a lot of times you want to know someone to get a referral. You want to have someone that has an experience with someone on another level too. So even beyond the association thing, it's always good to work with someone that you trust. For me, I tell people all the time, I mean, I've closed big deals, I've closed small deals. For me, the most satisfying feeling is actually not like getting that money in my account. It's actually when my client tells me, thank you so much. For whatever reason. It could be that they needed to get off property. It could be that they needed to get a property to build their family home. But you realize that you actually just help someone with a serious life goal. I mean, really, that's one of the biggest decisions that someone's going to make in their life, to sell or buy a property. And you do a good job. Honestly, that to me is what really means most to me.
And unfortunately, we're out of time, Carlo, and I know they have the leader of our representatives from the opposition on Love FM. So just final words from you. How do people find out more about the association? I think that's key.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so you can find us on social media. I think it's at Belize NAR, so Belize NAR. That's our social media handles. And then our website is www.belizenar.org. And I would like to say that we have a lot of great information there, not just on our members who are agents and brokers, and also associates who do like support services like accounting, law, things like that. But we also have great information about the industry in general. We have our code of ethics there that you can see too, so you can kind of see the level that we hold ourselves. And then you can also see some of the stuff we've been doing over the last couple years, like webinars, stuff like that kind of help our agents, our members, to kind of raise their level, right? And then you can get a better idea of what we're doing essentially, right?
All right. And with that said, Carlo, we really want to thank you. Sorry it was such a short engagement, but we'll have to have you back. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you guys very much too, actually. It was great. Short but sweet.